Get her out of here. Now! Rebecca Stone's voice shattered the quiet of the sleek corporate lobby like a knife. The sound of her command echoed against the marble floors, sending a chill through the air. Lena's eyes widened, her gaze snapping to the water bottle Rebecca raised, aiming it like a weapon. Before Lena could even process what was happening, the bottle tilted. Clear liquid arced through the air in a perfect, slow-motion trajectory. It collided with Lena's face with brutal precision, cold, unforgiving, splashing across her face, soaking her silk blouse, dripping onto her shoes. The water pooled at her feet, a sharp contrast against the polished floors. "People like you don't belong here," Rebecca sneered, her empty water bottle still raised like a trophy. 15 employees stood frozen in the corporate lobby of Phoenix Solutions. Phones appeared in their hands, like flowers sprouting in the spring. They filmed the moment, capturing every drop of the humiliation unfolding before them. Lena said nothing. She didn't scream, didn't argue. She just stood there, water streaming down her face, her wedding ring catching the afternoon light, a soft gleam against the chaos. Rebecca smiled triumphantly. She had no idea. She just destroyed her career in 10 seconds. Have you ever watched someone make the worst mistake of their life without realizing it? It had been 30 minutes earlier when Lena had parked her black Tesla in the visitor section of Phoenix Solutions. The license plate read DNA Love, a gift from her husband on their second anniversary. She was carrying a handmade lunch container wrapped in elegant silver paper. Inside was his favorite meal, a perfectly prepared steak, medium rare, with garlic mashed potatoes and roasted vegetables, exactly how he liked it. Today marked their 5th wedding anniversary. Lena wanted to surprise him. She hadn't planned anything grand, just a simple lunch, a small moment of connection amid their hectic lives. The lobby was bright with afternoon sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, its polished marble gleaming like the inside of a diamond. Lena's heels clicked as she walked across the floor, her steps full of purpose. She felt a flutter of excitement as she approached the reception desk, ready to surprise her husband. "Excuse me," she said to Sarah, the young receptionist, her smile warm and welcoming. "I'm here to see David Matthews. It's personal." Sarah looked up from her computer screen, eyes narrowing slightly. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," Lena replied, her voice soft, polite. "But I'm his wife. It's our anniversary, and I brought him lunch." Before Sarah could respond, a voice cut through the air, sharp and dismissive. "Who do you think you are?" Lena turned sharply, her heart skipping a beat. Rebecca Stone stood next to her, an imposing figure in a charcoal suit, arms crossed, her eyes narrowing as she took in Lena from head to toe. "The CEO doesn't meet with unscheduled visitors." Rebecca's voice dripped with disdain, every word calculated to put Lena in her place. Lena felt the blood rush to her face. She had dealt with these kinds of assumptions before, people who assumed she was just some trophy wife trying to get into her husband's business. But she'd never encountered such overt hostility. "Not here. Not like this. I understand," Lena said calmly, smiling despite the sting of Rebecca's words. "But it's a special occasion, and I'd really like to see him." Rebecca's eyes flicked to the lunch container in Lena's hand, her lips curling into a sneer. "Special occasion? Let me guess. Another woman trying to weasel her way into the life of our CEO." Lena's breath caught in her chest. She had expected resistance. She had prepared for some awkward questioning. But not this. Not public humiliation. The insinuation in Rebecca's voice wasn't just uncalled for. It was blatant and cruel. "I'm his wife," Lena said, keeping her voice steady, though the words tasted bitter in her mouth. Rebecca laughed, sharp and cutting, like a blade. "His wife?" She waved her hand dismissively. "David Matthews' wife." She gestured dramatically, her voice rising for the growing audience around them. "Do you see any resemblance here, people?" Employees who had been glancing at their phones had stopped. Then 3 employees stopped. Then 5, 10. Phones were raised in the air, the cameras capturing the drama. Rebecca's voice rose, gaining momentum, turning the lobby into a spectacle. "Look at this, everyone. Another gold digger, another woman with ulterior motives." Lena felt the heat rise in her neck. Her fingers tightened on her bag strap, the smooth leather biting into her palm. Inside her purse, her phone buzzed. David's text, a beacon of warmth in the storm. Looking forward to lunch. Love you. She took a deep breath and fought to maintain composure. I'm his wife, she repeated, but this time the words felt heavier. She wasn't just defending herself. She was fighting back against the assumptions people had about her. Rebecca's eyes narrowed. Sure you are, she sneered. Women like you always think they can climb their way into the upper echelons of power. She glanced at the employees around her, making sure they were all watching, making sure everyone was absorbing her words. Social climbers. Gold diggers. Lena's stomach twisted. She had earned her MBA, worked at one of the top consulting firms before marriage. She was a black belt in karate, a polyglot who spoke 3 languages. She wasn't a social climber. But none of that seemed to matter to Rebecca. To her, Lena was just one of them. I'm not harassing anyone, Lena said, her voice steady despite the humiliation burning in her chest. I brought my husband lunch. For our anniversary. Jerome, the security guard, approached, his face drawn with uncertainty. He had worked at Phoenix Solutions for over 3 years and knew Lena. He had seen her at company picnics, at company holiday events with David. He had always admired their relationship. But now, Rebecca was his boss. Jerome, perfect timing, Rebecca said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Please escort this woman out. She's harassing our staff. Lena's heart pounded in her chest, the blood rushing in her ears. She felt the weight of Rebecca's words hanging over her, suffocating her. She pulled out her phone, showing Jerome a picture of her and David from their anniversary dinner last year. The photo had been taken at one of their private events. David's arm wrapped around her waist, both of them smiling, happy. She showed it to Jerome, her fingers trembling slightly. This is my husband, she said softly. I'm his wife. Rebecca barely glanced at the phone. Photoshopped nonsense, she muttered, rolling her eyes. You people are always so desperate to prove yourselves. The words hit harder than any slap. You people. The 2 words stung like physical blows. Lena clenched her fist, but she refused to break. She had been through much worse, but she wasn't going to let Rebecca win. Security cameras are recording this, whispered Martha, the longtime administrative assistant who had been working at Phoenix for over 12 years. She had seen it all, the years of growth, David's rise to the top, and the couple's wedding photos displayed proudly on his desk. Rebecca whipped around, her expression turning dark. Recording what? Me protecting our executives from opportunists. The crowd in the lobby grew. Employees returned from the cafeteria. Interns checked their phones, and software developers gathered in clusters. Lena checked her watch. David's board meeting would end in 5 minutes. She had planned to surprise him when he came downstairs for their scheduled lunch. Lena's grip tightened around her car keys, the Tesla key fob catching light, engraved with their anniversary initials, DNA Forever in elegant script. I can call him right now, she said, her voice steady but firm. Don't you dare disturb Mr. Matthews with your games, Rebecca snapped, turning back to Jerome. I said, remove her. Now. Jerome shifted uncomfortably. He had worked here long enough to know when something didn't feel right. But Rebecca was his supervisor, and company policy meant he had to follow her directive. But something felt wrong. Very wrong. The silence in the lobby was suffocating. Lena stood there, water dripping from her face, her blouse clinging to her skin. The phones, held high by onlookers, captured the humiliation in real time. Every eye was on her now, a spectacle of power and cruelty that Rebecca had created without even realizing the consequences. Rebecca's stone smile had begun to fade as she stood there, watching her victory unfold. She had no idea that in those 10 seconds, she had just set in motion a chain of events that would tear down everything she'd worked for. She was too caught up in her power, too confident in her position as the head of HR, to realize she had crossed a line that would cost her everything. Lena took a slow, deep breath, gathering herself. Her heart was pounding, her mind racing, but she refused to let the flood of emotions control her. She could feel the eyes of every employee in the room, but it didn't matter. She was here for one reason only. She had to see her husband, and she would not let anyone, least of all Rebecca Stone, stop her. For a moment, it felt like time had stopped. The sounds of the office, the phones ringing, the soft murmur of conversations, faded into the background. All that was left was a cold, humiliating reality of what had just happened. Lena's eyes flicked to the security cameras above, the ones that had been silently recording every second of her ordeal. She could feel the eyes of the employees, some uncomfortable, others unsure of what to do. The newer hires had no idea what was happening, while the older ones, the ones who had seen David and Lena together at company picnics and holiday parties, knew better. They knew who Lena was. They knew what she was capable of. But now, she wasn't just a CEO's wife. Now, she was a symbol of the kind of workplace culture that had allowed someone like Rebecca to thrive unchecked. "Lena, are you okay?" The voice cut through the tension like a knife. It was Jerome, the security guard. He stepped forward slowly, his eyes filled with uncertainty. For the first time, he wasn't sure what his next move should be. The discomfort in his posture was impossible to miss. "I'm fine," Lena replied, her voice steady, even though her hands were shaking. "I'm just here to see my husband." She didn't want to make a scene. She didn't want this to escalate any further, but Rebecca had left her with no choice. Rebecca was still standing at the center of the lobby, a proud look still plastered on her face. She glanced around, her eyes scanning the employees, looking for validation, for support. But all she saw was a growing unease among her colleagues. "Jerome," Rebecca said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Don't just stand there. Do something. Escort this woman out of the building." But Jerome didn't move. He stood frozen, looking at Lena, his face contorted with indecision. He had worked at Phoenix Solutions for years, and he had seen plenty of uncomfortable situations, but never one like this. "Lena, Jerome hesitated, his eyes flicking to Rebecca before landing on Lena's face. He looked like he wanted to say something, anything, to help, but the words stuck in his throat. For a moment, Lena thought she might just leave. The humiliation was unbearable, but she had to remind herself why she was here. She wasn't just going to let this go. She had a purpose. She was fighting for respect, for her marriage, and for the truth. "I'm calling David," Lena said, her voice breaking the silence in the room. Before Rebecca could stop her, Lena reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. She didn't care about the cameras. She didn't care about the crowd of employees watching her every move. She pressed David's number with steady fingers and lifted the phone to her ear. The seconds dragged on. Each ring felt like an eternity, the tension in the air growing thicker with every passing second. "Lena!" David's voice crackled through the speaker, a mix of surprise and concern. "David, I'm here at the office," she said, her voice calm, but there was a hint of the emotion she had been holding back. "I'm at the front desk. Rebecca she threw water at me. She called me a gold digger. She said I didn't belong here." David's voice dropped, the tone shifting from confusion to something much darker. "I'm on my way," he said, and Lena could hear the determination in his voice. "Stay where you are. I'm coming down right now." Lena ended the call and looked around the lobby. Her eyes met those of the employees who were still recording. The silence was deafening. It was as if the entire company was holding its breath, waiting for the next move. Rebecca, on the other hand, was still trying to maintain control. "This is ridiculous," she muttered, trying to save face. She turned to the crowd, trying to rally the employees. "We can't let people like this disrupt the work environment. This isn't about personal vendettas. This is about protecting the integrity of the company." But the words rang hollow. The crowd was no longer on her side. The murmurs had begun, quiet at first, but growing louder. Martha, the longtime administrative assistant who had worked at Phoenix for over a decade, stepped forward. Her face was pale, but her voice was steady. "Rebecca, I can't stay silent anymore," she said. "You know who she is. We all know who she is. This isn't just about some visitor. This is David's wife, Lena Matthews. She's been with him from the beginning." Rebecca froze, her eyes wide with shock. The truth was hitting her in real time, but it was too late. She had already dug her own grave. "I've known them both for years," Martha continued, her voice gaining strength. "I've watched their relationship grow. I've seen the love they share. You can't just treat her like this. We won't let you." Lena felt a wave of gratitude wash over her, but it was quickly overshadowed by the realization that this was only the beginning. The public spectacle had just begun to unfold. Just then, the elevator dinged, and the doors slid open. David Matthews, CEO of Phoenix Solutions, stepped out into the lobby, his face hard with a mix of concern and fury. His eyes locked on Lena immediately. He moved toward her in quick strides, his hand reaching out to touch her face gently, brushing the water away. "What happened?" he asked, his voice a low growl. Lena stood tall, despite the humiliation still burning in her chest. She held herself together, maintaining her composure. "Rebecca threw water at me. She humiliated me in front of the whole office. She called me a gold digger and said I didn't belong here." David's expression darkened, and the energy in the lobby shifted. He turned to face Rebecca, his voice cold and controlled. "Rebecca," he said, his tone cutting through the tension like ice. "What have you done?" Rebecca stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing as she tried to find the words. But there were no words that could fix what she had done. David's gaze swept over the crowd of employees, all of whom had witnessed the scene unfold. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice growing louder. "What is this? What kind of company are we running where people are treated like this?" Rebecca opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. The weight of her actions was crashing down on her in real time. David turned back to Lena, his protective instinct kicking in. "Let's go," he said firmly, his hand gently pulling her toward him. "We're leaving." As David escorted Lena toward the exit, Rebecca stood there, realizing too late the enormity of the mistake she had made. She had just destroyed her career, and the repercussions were only beginning to unfold. David Matthews didn't say another word as he walked Lena through the lobby, his arm protectively around her. His gaze, sharp and unwavering, swept over the employees who had been watching the whole exchange. Their phones were still out, still recording, capturing every moment of the now infamous public humiliation. His every step was calculated, and his silence spoke louder than any words ever could. Lena could feel the eyes of everyone on her, but she refused to let it get to her. She had made her choice. This wasn't about justifying herself anymore. It was about doing the right thing, standing her ground, and letting David handle the fallout. She wasn't going to let Rebecca Stone destroy her dignity or her marriage. As they neared the elevator, the tense silence was broken by the sound of a voice calling out from behind them. "David." It was Rebecca's voice. She was still standing in the middle of the lobby, her face flushed with a mix of disbelief and panic. She had lost control of the situation, and now she was scrambling, trying to salvage whatever shred of dignity she had left. David stopped in his tracks, but he didn't turn around immediately. He stood there, his shoulders squared, his expression calm but unreadable. Lena could feel the shift in the air, the pressure that hung over them, the moment of reckoning that was quickly approaching. "What do you want, Rebecca?" David's voice was low, a stark contrast to the high-pitched hysteria that had echoed through the lobby earlier. Rebecca swallowed hard. "David, I didn't mean for it to go this far," she began, her words stumbling over one another. "I was just trying to protect the company. You know how important it is to maintain boundaries between personal and professional." David's eyes narrowed, the subtle shift in his posture enough to send a chill down Rebecca's spine. He slowly turned to face her, his gaze intense. "Protect the company?" he asked, his voice growing colder. "By humiliating my wife in front of the entire staff? By treating her like she doesn't belong here? You really think that's protecting anything?" Rebecca flinched as the weight of his words hit her. She had underestimated him, and now there was no way out. She could feel the eyes of every employee in the lobby on her. Phones were still recording, and the live stream had already begun spreading across social media like wildfire. The comments were flooding in, and the hashtag #PhoenixScandal was already trending. "You don't get it, do you, Rebecca?" David continued, his voice rising just enough to ensure everyone in the room could hear. "You didn't just humiliate Lena. You didn't just make a mistake. You've jeopardized everything we've built here, everything this company stands for. The moment you crossed that line, physically assaulting my wife, calling her a gold digger, trying to get her thrown out of the building, you destroyed any chance of saving your job." Rebecca's face went pale. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. She had crossed the line, and there was no going back, but she wasn't ready to admit defeat just yet. "David, please." "I didn't mean," she started, her voice cracking. "Stop." David cut her off sharply. "There's nothing you can say to fix this. I trusted you. Rebecca, you've been with me since the beginning, and this is how you repay that trust." Lena stood by David's side, her eyes meeting Rebecca's with quiet fury. The humiliation she had endured was still fresh, still stinging, but she was no longer the victim in this situation. She was stronger now. She wasn't backing down. "You've crossed a line, Rebecca," Lena said quietly, her voice steady and resolute. "And now, you have to face the consequences." Rebecca's eyes shifted between David and Lena, panic rising in her chest. The realization that there was no way out hit her like a freight train. She had ruined her career, and now there was nothing left for her to hold on to. David turned back to Lena, his voice softening as he addressed her. "Let's go, baby." He gave her a gentle squeeze, his protective instinct stronger than ever. "We'll handle this. Together." As they stepped into the elevator, David hit the button for the top floor, his back to the lobby. For the first time in years, he felt like he was losing control. He had built Phoenix Solutions from the ground up, made countless sacrifices to get to this point, and now it felt like everything was on the brink of collapse. Rebecca's actions had set off a chain reaction, one that couldn't be undone. The elevator doors closed, but the tension in the lobby lingered. Employees watched in silence, unsure of what was to come. They had witnessed the downfall of Rebecca Stone, the woman who had once held all the power over their careers, their futures. But now, they were left with a sense of uncertainty. What would happen to the company now? Would things ever be the same? Meanwhile, in the boardroom upstairs, the team was already discussing the fallout from the public spectacle. The executive staff, all experienced professionals who had seen their fair share of corporate drama, knew that this was more than just a personal matter. This was about the company's reputation, its integrity, and its future. "I've been monitoring the social media," Michael, the CFO, said grimly, his eyes scanning the screen in front of him. "Phoenix scandal is trending, and the comments are flooding in. People are already calling for Rebecca's resignation. It's not just about what happened in the lobby. It's about what this says about the culture we've allowed to exist here." David leaned back in his chair, his jaw clenched, but he said nothing. The weight of the situation was heavy, and he knew that the decisions he made in the next few hours would determine the fate of the company. Lena, standing next to him, spoke up. "David, we can't let this go unaddressed. We have to take action. We need to show the employees, the public, and the world that this is not the kind of company we want to be. This isn't just about Rebecca, it's about systemic change." David nodded slowly. He had always known that changes needed to be made, but he hadn't realized how deeply the rot had taken hold until now. He had trusted Rebecca. He had believed in her. But now, it was clear, the company needed to change. The culture needed to evolve. "We're going to do this right," David said, his voice firm with resolve. "Rebecca's actions won't define us, but we're going to make sure this doesn't happen again. I'm putting a plan into action. We'll restructure HR, implement diversity training, and overhaul the hiring process. We'll make sure that every single employee here understands that respect, equality, and inclusion are non-negotiable." Lena gave him a small smile, a look of pride in her eyes. She knew this was just the beginning, but together they could turn this crisis into an opportunity to create lasting change. And as they moved forward, they would show the world that Phoenix Solutions wasn't just about technology. It was about values, integrity, and making the workplace a better place for everyone. David Matthews stood at the head of the long conference table, his fingers tightly gripping the edge. The room was silent, the atmosphere thick with tension. His board members and senior executives were all present, each of them acutely aware that everything had changed in the last few hours. What was supposed to be a routine afternoon meeting had turned into an emergency session. Lena sat beside him, her presence a calm force amidst the storm. She had been with him every step of the way, from the moment Rebecca threw that water to now, as they faced the consequences of the public spectacle that had taken over the company's reputation. "Where do we stand?" David asked, his voice carrying the weight of the crisis. His eyes were focused on the group of executives before him. Michael, the CFO, broke the silence first. He was pale, the gravity of the situation clearly weighing on him. "We've seen a significant drop in our stock value," he said, glancing at his tablet. "About 7% since the incident. And it's not just financial. The backlash online is growing stronger by the minute. Social media is calling it a company-wide failure. The hashtag #HashPhoenix scandal is trending, and the comments are not pretty." David's jaw tightened, but he didn't let the pressure show. This was the moment of truth. Every move he made from here on out would determine not only the future of his company, but his personal legacy. "We can't let this drag us down," Lena spoke up, her voice steady and clear. "This is our chance to prove what we stand for. If we want to turn this around, we have to act fast, and we have to act decisively." There was a murmur of agreement in the room. David nodded slowly, appreciating Lena's unwavering support. He turned to the head of legal, Susan, who had been silently observing the discussion. "Susan," he said, his voice low but authoritative, "what are the legal implications of Rebecca's actions? What do we need to prepare for?" Susan looked up, adjusting her glasses as she spoke. "The legal risks are significant. We could be facing lawsuits for defamation, discrimination, and workplace harassment. There's a strong case for a hostile work environment claim. Rebecca's behavior has left us vulnerable." David's face hardened. He already knew the stakes, but hearing it from Susan made it all too real. This wasn't just about public perception anymore. It was a legal minefield they were walking into. "We can't let this become a drawn-out court battle," David said. "Rebecca's already damaged the company's reputation enough. We need to take immediate action." The conversation continued, but David's mind was racing. He had trusted Rebecca. She had been with him since the beginning, a crucial part of his rise to the top. But now, the very person he had relied on had shown herself to be a liability. He had to move forward for the sake of his company, his employees, and his family. Meanwhile, the atmosphere in the lobby of Phoenix Solutions was charged with electric tension. Employees who had once looked up to Rebecca Stone now watched the downfall unfold in real time. The whispers had begun, quiet at first, but growing louder. Jerome, the security guard who had been caught in the middle of the confrontation, had seen it all. He had worked at Phoenix Solutions for years, and he had always admired David and Lena. But the events of the last few hours had shaken him. He had witnessed firsthand how a single moment could ruin a person's career, a company's reputation, and the lives of everyone involved. He walked past the rows of employees, his footsteps heavy on the polished marble. He couldn't shake the image of Lena standing there, water dripping from her face, her composure unbroken even in the face of public humiliation. He had never seen anything like it. And he knew, everyone in this building knew, that Rebecca's actions had crossed a line that could never be undone. As he passed by the reception desk, he caught sight of Martha, the longtime administrative assistant who had spoken up earlier in the meeting. Martha had always been quiet, her head down, focused on her work. But today, she had found her voice. "Jerome," Martha called softly, stepping out from behind the desk. "We need to talk." Jerome stopped in his tracks, turning to face her. "What's going on, Martha?" he asked, his voice low. "We both know what happened here today," Martha said, her voice shaking slightly. "But I'm not going to stand by and pretend like I didn't see what was going on with Rebecca. This company has been turning a blind eye for too long. Rebecca's been toxic for years, but nobody said anything because of her position. But today, she trailed off, taking a deep breath. Today, I can't stay silent." Jerome looked around nervously, making sure no one was listening. "You're not wrong," he said quietly. "But what are we supposed to do about it now? We've all seen the damage she's done. But it's bigger than her. This could destroy everything." Martha nodded. "David has to act. He has to make the right call. If not, we'll all pay the price." Back in the boardroom, David and Lena had already begun to make plans. The executive team had rallied behind them, knowing that the only way forward was through transparency, accountability, and swift action. The first order of business was clear. Rebecca had to be removed from her position, effective immediately. But that wasn't enough. The company needed to make a statement, one that would show the world they were committed to change, to fairness, to equity. "We're going to launch a full internal investigation," David announced, his voice cutting through the air with authority. "I want every employee, every department, every process to be reviewed. We're going to change this company from the ground up. No more excuses. We're going to make sure that nothing like this ever happens again." Lena nodded in agreement. "We need to establish a diversity and inclusion committee, and I'm going to head it," she said firmly. "We're not just making a statement for the public. We're going to live it. We're going to lead by example." David looked at her, a deep sense of pride swelling in his chest. Lena had always been his rock, but now, more than ever, she was a backbone of their company's future. "We're also going to set up a fund for workplace equality," David added. $5 million to start. We're going to make sure that employees who feel discriminated against have resources and support." The room fell silent for a moment as the gravity of David's words sank in. They were no longer just reacting to crisis. They were taking control, turning this disaster into a chance to make real change. Rebecca's actions had exposed the rot that had been hiding in plain sight. Now, it was time to fix it. As David and Lena left the boardroom, they knew the journey ahead would be long and difficult. But they were ready. They had no choice. The consequences for Rebecca were inevitable. The whispers of her downfall were already spreading throughout the building. She was done, but the real work was just beginning. The company had been wounded, but it could heal. The culture could change. And Phoenix Solutions would emerge stronger, better, and more united than ever before. The IT was a morning after the storm. The lobby of Phoenix Solutions felt different today. Gone was the bustling energy that had defined the space in the past. Today, there was a quiet, almost eerie stillness, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Lena Matthews stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of David's office, looking out over the city below. The sunlight filtered through the glass, casting a soft glow over the skyline. She had always loved this view, the promise of limitless potential, the sense of success, of growth. But today, it felt distant. The day had begun with hope, but the past 24 hours had brought an avalanche of chaos, one that neither she nor David could ignore. David was behind her, his voice low but firm as he made the final adjustments to his public statement. It was time to address the world. "I'll make sure the press release goes out in the next few minutes," David said, his fingers hovering over the keyboard of his laptop. "We're going to own this. Lena, no more hiding, no more excuses." Lena turned to face him, her eyes reflecting the gravity of the situation. "I know we have to move fast," she said, "but this is bigger than just a statement. People are already questioning the culture here. If we want to fix things, we need to do more than just apologize. We have to show them we're committed to real change." David met her gaze, and for a moment, the tension between them was palpable. He understood what was at stake. This wasn't just about their reputation as a company. It was about the values they stood for and the kind of environment they wanted to build for their employees. "We will," David said, his voice resolute. "I've already spoken with HR. The investigation into the workplace culture is underway, and we're going to implement the changes we discussed. I won't let Rebecca's actions define this company." Back in the lobby, employees were gathered in small clusters, the atmosphere thick with whispered conversations. Rebecca's termination had been official, but that didn't stop the murmurs from spreading. Some employees were still processing the events of the day before. Rebecca, once a trusted figure in the company, had been removed in a matter of hours. The shock had yet to wear off. Jerome, the security guard, stood near the reception desk, his eyes scanning the room. He had seen it all, Rebecca's overreach, her cruelty, and the aftermath of her downfall. But as the hours passed, the mood in the office had begun to shift. There was a sense of uncertainty in the air, a feeling that the company was at a crossroads. The employees were still watching, waiting to see what would happen next. Martha, the administrative assistant who had spoken up the day before, was among the group of employees standing in the lobby. She had been with the company for over 12 years, and she had seen it all, the rise, the fall, the power struggles. But never had she seen such a shift, such a moment of reckoning. She knew what had happened wasn't just a one-time incident. It was a symptom of a deeper issue that had been allowed to fester for far too long. She glanced over at Jerome, her face serious. "What do you think is going to happen now?" she asked quietly, almost as if afraid to speak too loudly. Jerome sighed, running a hand through his hair. I don't know, Martha. All I know is things aren't the same. Rebecca's gone, and the way David and Lena handled it, they're serious about change. But they're going to have to prove it. Martha nodded slowly, her fingers fidgeting with a pen in her hand. The thing is, Jerome, she said, her voice low, this isn't just about Rebecca. It's about all of us. All the things we've ignored, the things we've let slide, because we didn't want to make waves. I think David and Lena are trying to fix it, but they're going to need everyone on board. We can't just go back to business as usual. Jerome's expression grew more somber. You're right. We're at a turning point. Either we stand with them, or we let this company fall apart. I've been here for a long time, and I've seen too many good people leave because they were treated like nothing. Martha's eyes flickered with a mix of determination and fear. I'm with them, she said firmly. I'm not going to stand by anymore. We need to change the culture. We need to make sure this doesn't happen again. David and Lena were preparing to address the employees directly, holding a meeting with the entire staff in the next hour. The press release had gone out, and media outlets were already covering the story. The hashtag #Phoenix scandal had exploded, but David was determined to turn the narrative around. As he paced back and forth in his office, his phone buzzed. It was a text from his PR team. The statement is live. The press conference is set for 3 p.m. Prepare yourself for the press onslaught. David took a deep breath and set the phone down. It's time, he said, looking at Lena. We've done everything we can behind the scenes. Now we have to show the world that we're committed to real change. Lena nodded. You've got this, she said, her voice unwavering. We've already started. Let's finish what we started. As they walked to the conference room, they were joined by several key members of the leadership team. The employees gathered in the large conference space, their faces a mix of curiosity, confusion, and anticipation. They knew that this wasn't going to be just another corporate meeting. This was different. David and Lena stood at the front of the room, their eyes scanning the sea of faces before them. It was now or never. David stepped forward and cleared his throat. Thank you all for coming today, he began, his voice calm and steady. I'm sure you're all aware of the events that unfolded yesterday. The situation involving Rebecca Stone was unacceptable, and I want to make it clear that her actions do not reflect the values of this company. What happened here was a failure on my part as CEO, and a failure on the part of the leadership team. We allowed a toxic culture to fester, and we allowed things to go unchecked. That ends now. There was a brief silence, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Rebecca is no longer with this company, David continued. Her behavior, her treatment of Lena, and her actions towards our staff were a violation of everything we stand for. But this is about more than just one person. This is about creating a company where every employee, no matter their race, gender, or background, is respected and valued. We will be implementing immediate changes to ensure that this kind of behavior never happens again. Lena stepped forward, her voice strong. We are committed to building a diverse, inclusive, and supportive workplace. We will be launching a company-wide initiative to address our hiring practices, our internal culture, and our leadership structure. This isn't just about words, it's about action, and we will hold ourselves accountable every step of the way. David nodded. We're going to create an anonymous reporting system so that every employee feels safe coming forward with concerns. We're going to conduct a full audit of our internal policies, and we're going to be transparent about the changes we're making. No one is above the law, and no one is above the values we hold dear. The room was silent for a moment, the weight of their words sinking in. But then, slowly, the applause began. It was quiet at first, tentative, but it grew as employees stood and clapped. They had seen what had happened, and they had heard the words. Now, it was up to them to see if the company would deliver on those promises. Lena exchanged a look with David, her heart swelling with pride. They had taken the first step. It wouldn't be easy, and there would be challenges ahead. But this was their moment to change Phoenix Solutions for the better. The aftermath of the incident with Rebecca Stone was like a storm that had passed, but its effects lingered in the air. The media had run wild with the story. #Phoenix scandal had become a rallying cry for those advocating for workplace equality, and Phoenix Solutions was under a microscope like never before. The press conferences were in full swing, and David Matthews had already appeared on several news outlets, reiterating his commitment to change. But the hard work was just beginning. He and Lena knew that they couldn't let the momentum from the crisis go to waste. That morning, as David walked through the office, he could feel the difference in the air. There was a renewed sense of purpose, but also a palpable tension. Employees were watching closely, waiting for him to follow through on the promises he had made. It was the beginning of a new chapter for Phoenix Solutions, but it was still uncertain whether the company would live up to its own expectations. Lena was already in the conference room, preparing for the weekly leadership meeting. The company had started implementing the first steps of the new policies they had outlined. They had set up the anonymous reporting system, and the Diversity and Inclusion Committee had begun meeting regularly to review the company's practices and internal culture. David walked into the room, his presence immediately commanding attention. His eyes swept over the leadership team, each of them sitting in tense silence, their faces a mix of anticipation and anxiety. "Good morning, everyone," David said, his voice steady. "I know things have been difficult over the past few days, but we need to stay focused. This company needs a complete cultural shift, and that starts with each and every one of us." Lena stood up beside him, her posture confident. "We've already started making changes, but we need to keep pushing forward. Today, we're going to discuss the progress we've made and what's coming next. We can't afford to lose our momentum." David nodded, acknowledging the gravity of the situation. Our company was built on values of innovation, respect, and hard work, but we allowed complacency to take root, and it showed. Rebecca's actions were a wake-up call for all of us, and now we're taking responsibility for our part in allowing that kind of culture to persist. There was a long silence in the room. The leadership team exchanged glances, but no one spoke up. David and Lena had made their stance clear, but now it was time to show results. Meanwhile, outside the conference room, the employees at Phoenix Solutions were beginning to see the real effect of the changes. The first round of diversity training had been completed, and the new company policies were being rolled out. Posters for the new anonymous reporting system were up around the office, and people had started using the system to share their experiences and concerns. Jerome, the security guard who had witnessed the earlier confrontation, had seen it firsthand. He had worked at Phoenix for years, and he could feel the shift in the air. There was a new openness, a new willingness to address the issues that had been ignored for so long. He stood near the elevators, waiting for his shift to end. Martha, the administrative assistant, approached him, her face a mix of exhaustion and cautious optimism. "How's it going?" Jerome asked, his voice low, as he glanced at the employees walking by. Martha sighed, rubbing the back of her neck. "It's strange, you know? There's a lot of change happening, and it's hard to tell what's real and what's just window dressing. But I'll tell you one thing, it feels like we're finally talking about things that should have been addressed a long time ago." Jerome nodded. "I hear you. It's going to take time, but we've got to make sure we're really committed to this. David and Lane are pushing for change, but we all need to be in this together." "I agree," Martha said. "We can't just pretend everything is fine now. People are still watching. We need to hold ourselves accountable, too. I think the company is on the right track, but we've got to stick with it. It's the only way forward." Back in the leadership meeting, David and Lena were discussing the next steps for their internal reform efforts. "We're making progress," Lena said, flipping through a stack of papers in front of her. "The feedback we've gotten from the Diversity Committee has been positive, but we need to move faster. We need to ensure that these new practices are implemented across every department. We can't afford to be complacent." David leaned forward, his brow furrowed in concentration. "We need to keep pushing, especially when it comes to leadership. It's not enough to change policies. We have to change mindsets. That means holding the leadership team accountable and making sure that these values are reflected at every level of the company." The room nodded in agreement. The task ahead of them was daunting, but David and Lena knew they had no choice. They had promised their employees and the world that they would lead by example. They had to deliver on that promise. "We're also going to launch a new mentorship program," Lena continued, "one that focuses on helping underrepresented employees develop leadership skills. It's not just about hiring more diverse talent. It's about giving them the tools to succeed and rise within the company. David smiled at her, his pride in her clear. Exactly. We're building a future where diversity isn't just a buzzword. It's part of our DNA. This is how we'll differentiate ourselves from the competition. It's not just the right thing to do. It's the smart thing to do. As the meeting went on, the team discussed further initiatives, quarterly diversity audits, employee resource groups, and better pathways for career advancement. There was still a lot of work to be done, but David and Lena were both resolved to see it through. A few days later, the media storm had settled slightly, but the changes at Phoenix Solutions were still making waves. The media had picked up on the company's promise of reform, and journalists were eager to see if the company would follow through. But David and Lena were not intimidated. They had taken the first step, and now they had to show the world that they were serious about creating a culture of accountability. David sat in front of the camera, his face serious but resolute. Yesterday, we made a mistake. We allowed a toxic culture to persist, and we allowed one individual's actions to go unchecked. But today, we're taking responsibility. Phoenix Solutions is committed to a future where every employee, regardless of their background, feels respected, valued, and empowered. And we're not stopping here. This is just the beginning. Lena stood beside him, her presence just as powerful. We've started the work of rebuilding trust, and we will continue to be transparent and accountable. We are committed to real, lasting change, and we will not rest until Phoenix Solutions is a place where everyone belongs. As the press conference ended, the response from the media was mixed. Some praised the company for taking swift action, while others remained skeptical. But one thing was clear. Phoenix Solutions was on a path to redemption, and the road ahead would be long. David and Lena knew they couldn't afford to falter. Not now, not after everything they had promised. And as they left the press room, the weight of the world on their shoulders, they both knew that their fight was far from over. But they were ready. The first quarter following the public scandal had been a whirlwind. The changes David and Lena had promised were slowly becoming a reality, but the road was still rocky. The initial shock had worn off, but the scars remained. Phoenix Solutions had been forever marked by the events that transpired in the lobby. Yet, somehow, amidst the storm, there was hope. Real change was happening. David stood in front of his desk, staring out the window of his office. The skyline of the city was more than just a view. It was a symbol of his company's future. It had been a long journey to this point, and while there was still work to be done, he could see the light at the end of the tunnel. The media had continued to report on Phoenix Solutions, but the tone had shifted. The company had faced the initial backlash, the public ridicule, and the legal consequences of Rebecca Stone's actions. But instead of crumbling, the company had begun to grow. There were fewer negative stories, and more about the company's commitment to reform, its new mentorship programs, and the transparency they had embraced. David's phone buzzed on the desk, snapping him out of his thoughts. It was a text from Lena, meeting in 10 minutes. It's time to show the world what we've done. The leadership team gathered in the boardroom, their faces serious but hopeful. The transformation of Phoenix Solutions had been swift but necessary. David and Lena had made sure of that. They had pushed through the pain of the scandal to implement real changes, from the new mentorship programs, to diversity training, to the anonymous reporting system. But it wasn't just about policy, it was about culture. They had committed to creating a space where every employee could thrive, regardless of their race, gender, or background. As the last of the executives filed into the room, Lena stood up, a sense of purpose radiating from her. The time had come to address the next phase of their company's revival. It wasn't enough to simply talk about change. They had to show it. Today, they were going to take the final step, launching their public announcement to solidify their commitment to a new, inclusive future. Today, Lena began, her voice steady and clear, we stand at the threshold of something much bigger than any one person or company. We stand for the future of Phoenix Solutions. We stand for a company where everyone belongs, where diversity isn't just something we talk about, it's something we live. David nodded, stepping up to stand beside her. We've already begun the process of rebuilding. We've made mistakes, but we've learned from them. And today, we're announcing a $10 million initiative that will support diversity in tech. We're investing in the future, not just of Phoenix Solutions, but of the industry as a whole. Lena continued, we'll partner with universities, local communities, and national organizations to provide mentorship, training, and scholarships for underrepresented talent in tech. This isn't just a one-time donation. This is a commitment to changing the pipeline from the ground up. There was a moment of silence as the weight of their words settled in. The room buzzed with approval, but David and Lena knew this was just the beginning. The press conference was scheduled for the afternoon, and the eyes of the world were on them. We're also launching a new company-wide initiative for ongoing cultural assessments, David said, his voice firm. Every year, we will audit our hiring processes, pay equity, and employee satisfaction to ensure we're doing the right thing. We will not stop holding ourselves accountable. The room erupted into applause. It wasn't just about words anymore. It was about action. Everyone in the room knew that David and Lena were taking the company to places it had never been before. The old Phoenix Solutions was gone. The new one was just beginning to take shape. As David and Lena left the meeting, they walked to the press room, their hearts racing. They had talked the talk, but now it was time to walk the walk. The press had been invited, and the world was waiting for their next move. The cameras flashed as they stepped onto the stage, the crowd's buzz filling the air. Reporters shouted out questions as they sat down at the table. David began, his voice strong. Thank you for being here today. Phoenix Solutions has faced its share of challenges recently, but we believe in our ability to grow from those challenges. Today, we're announcing a major step forward in our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're investing in a future where every employee has the opportunity to succeed, and we're taking steps to ensure that our company culture reflects those values. Lena spoke next, her words carefully chosen. We know that actions speak louder than words. That's why we're taking immediate steps to provide opportunities for underrepresented groups in tech, to support women in leadership, and to ensure that Phoenix Solutions is a place where every person feels valued. As the press conference continued, the journalists asked their questions, but the tone had changed. The backlash from the scandal was still there, but now the narrative was shifting. The company was showing that it was more than just a negative press. It was about taking responsibility and working to change things for the better. The commitment David and Lena had made was undeniable. They weren't just trying to save face. They were reshaping an entire company and industry. Meanwhile, Rebecca Stone's world had completely unraveled. Her wrongful termination lawsuit had been dismissed, and her reputation was tarnished beyond repair. The media had painted her as the villain, and no amount of apology could undo the damage she had caused. After losing her high-paying job at Phoenix Solutions, she had been forced to take a much lower position at a non-profit, working for a fraction of the salary she had once commanded. But the real consequence was the damage to her career. Once a rising star in the corporate world, Rebecca was now seen as a cautionary tale. The lessons from her fall were clear. Unchecked power, unchecked prejudice, and a refusal to adapt had cost her everything. Back at Phoenix Solutions, the changes continued. The diversity and inclusion programs were being praised by employees. The anonymous reporting system had already helped multiple people report instances of bias and mistreatment, and they had been addressed swiftly and transparently. The feedback was positive. The shift had begun. Jerome, who had once been caught in the middle of the confrontation, now stood proudly by the reception desk. He had seen the worst of the old culture, but now there was a sense of pride in his chest. He knew things were different. He could feel it in the air. Phoenix Solutions was no longer a company defined by fear or privilege. It was a company that had learned from its mistakes and was moving forward. Martha, too, had felt the change. She had worked alongside Lena for years, but now she saw something different in her. Lena had always been a quiet force, but now she was a leader in every sense of the word. And that leadership was trickling down to everyone. It was changing the culture, one person at a time. As the weeks went on, David and Lena continued to work tirelessly to implement their vision. They knew it wasn't a quick fix, but they also knew that their commitment was unwavering. They had taken the first step, and now they were building something lasting, something that would change the way Phoenix Solutions operated, and something that would make a real difference in the world. Months later, Phoenix Solutions was thriving in ways it never had before. The $10 million initiative had already funded scholarships and mentorships for hundreds of students from underrepresented backgrounds. The company's diversity had dramatically improved, and employee satisfaction had soared. David and Lena Matthews stood together, stronger than ever. Their company had faced a storm and come out on the other side. They had redefined Phoenix Solutions, and in doing so, they had changed the industry. As David stood before his employees at the annual company meeting, he smiled at Lena, proud of everything they had accomplished. "We've come a long way," he said, his voice full of emotion, "and we're just getting started." The new Phoenix Solutions had emerged from the ashes of the past, stronger, better, and more inclusive than ever before. And it was just the beginning.